Good morning. Welcome to the Kingsport News Hour for the 16th year of Changi, the leap sixth month and the eighth day by the heavenly calendar in that leap sixth month. Tim Elder sitting in for the second king of Changi, and let's take our tour around the kingdom to see what is going on. And at the Tongkang, Tennessee, it is currently 70 degrees and clear. High today of 81, humid with periods of cloud and sunshine. Heavy thunderstorm around this afternoon, 67 for a low tonight. Thunderstorm in spots this evening, otherwise cloudy. And at True Father's hometown in Jeongju, North Pyongan Province, in what is today North Korea, 83 degrees currently, mostly clear. 70 degrees for a low tonight. Tomorrow, partly sunny, very warm and humid, high of 90 degrees. At the Turnagain Palace in Northeast Pennsylvania, it is currently 60 degrees, mostly cloudy, and 74 for a high today. Wow, they were pretty low yesterday too, weren't they? So it looks like some nice fall weather there. Clouds giving way to some sun with a shower in spots early this morning, then becoming less humid. 74 for a high. 74 for a high. Oh, yeah. Getting very jealous here. Anyway, tonight clear to partly cloudy, low of 52. And then at the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas, currently 75 and clear. Today, a high of 99. Partly sunny and very warm. An afternoon thunderstorm in a couple of spots tonight. Low of 74, clear to partly cloudy and humid with a thunderstorm in parts of the area. Suncheon Palace in South Korea. It is currently 85 and mostly sunny, turning cloudy and humid tonight, getting down to 75. Tomorrow, a very hot, humid, sunny clouds, and 99 for a high. At the Gunma Palaces in Japan, currently 86 and cloudy, turning cloudy and humid. Lows tonight of 76. Tomorrow, high of 101. 101 tomorrow. Tomorrow, very hot with intervals of clouds and sunshine, dangerous heat. And at the Ilan, Taiwan property, it is currently 81 and clear, rain starting in about a half hour or so. And tonight getting down to 79. Thunderstorm in spots this evening, otherwise becoming partly cloudy. Tomorrow, cloudy with a little rain, high of 93. Yeah. So Taiwan, the temperature is not so bad, is it? Not so bad. It's often not even 90 degrees. Anyway, 93 tomorrow. Okay. And let's go to Father's Word. And right now I am in the book on the life of the owner of Cheonryugu. Let me get some light on this. Okay. And I'm in the life of owner Cheonryugu. Chapter 3, God and True Parents is the title. And within chapter 3, I'm in section 1. Okay. Section 1. Section 1's a long section. About halfway through section 1, I guess. So today, in the existing churches or established or traditional churches, they say that they will go to heaven, they will believe in Jesus and go to heaven, don't they? We say that we will accomplish heaven, we will realize heaven, we will bring heaven into reality and go to heaven. Kingdom of Heaven is currently empty. I'm speaking here in 1992, November 19th. Because the original ideal family does not exist, because the attempt was made to bring this about, but that attempt was not accomplished. The Messiah must come in the era of the second coming and accomplish this. The Messiah is the true parent. He is also the king of the true kingdom and the king of heaven and earth. November 19th, 1992. Praise God. Okay. All right, so let's see. Speaking of the era of the second coming, let's see what's going on. Okay, so President Trump has imposed or has is now officially imposing tariffs on most countries around the world, and some I think are not going to begin until August 7th, but at least they are all announced and the markets are aware of them. And it's interesting to me to see how the markets are reacting. I noticed that the dollar is actually uh, it's bouncing. It's actually up quite a bit compared to even a week or so ago. Right now, it's back up the dollar index here at the bottom here, DXY. This is an index of the dollar against major trading currencies, and it's back above 100, although just by a little bit. It was all the way down as far as 97. Now it's back above 100. And here, actually, this morning, the dollar is stronger against every currency except that it's down a bit on the Japanese yen. But even the Japanese yen is back above 150, where it was down, 146 or so before. And then also the dollar is down just about 1% against the Russian ruble for some reason. So other than that, the dollar, these red arrows mean that these currencies are down against the dollar. So it means that the dollar is actually up against them. So it's a little bit confusing, but that's what these red arrows are actually positive for the dollar, and these green arrows are positive for the dollar. And then let's see. So it looks like the markets are saying that, at least in the short run, the tariffs are good for the dollar. Although I think, from what I've seen, most people believe that the dollar will continue to weaken in the long term, even not just long term, but also in the midterm. But anyway, for now, this is the case. We'll have to see how it actually affects. I'm not an economist. I cannot forecast what effect this is going to have on foreign exchange rates or on trade or on GDP or anything else like that. But we'll have to see where the numbers come. Assuming, of course, that the numbers are not fudged, which, well, well, yes. Okay, so President Trump is getting what he wanted, getting what he promised, right, in his election campaign. And this is the thing that people are beginning to realize, that this guy actually does what he says he's going to do, right? Other candidates, they'll say something during the campaign, and then when time comes to actually do something, they say, well, I don't know, circumstances have changed, or gee, after coming to the White House, I've learned all this other stuff. So I think I'll change my mind, or what did I say? Did I say ever say something like that? But no, President Trump actually does what he says he's going to do. And this is why so many people support him. I checked the Rasmussen thing for it. Rasmussen poll on him, the daily poll, and he's at 50 to 49 right now. So the 50 supporting and 49 not approving. And also the strongly approve is about 7 points below the strongly disapprove. But so 50 to 49, that's basically where he's been now for a while. And the world is learning that he's in charge. He's in charge, right? Now, the one sort of big question that remains, one sort of thing that President Trump has not been able to resolve is the Ukraine situation, right? And the relationship with Vladimir Putin. And President Trump now has issued a pretty strong ultimatum against Russia, saying that if Russia doesn't come to the peace table by the end of next week, or basically end of next week, that he's going to impose some strong sanctions against Russia, including sort of indirect sanctions. In other words, sanctions against China and India for supporting Russia's war effort. And that actually is where he could actually accomplish his mission to to bring down the Chinese Communist Party if he actually follows through on that. So we'll see what's going on here. Russia's actions in Ukraine disgusting, says Trump. He condemns Russia's attacks on Kiev as Ukraine's Zelensky calls for regime change in Moscow. And Trump has threatened new sanctions while slamming Russia's military actions in Ukraine as disgusting. We're looking at this on Al Jazeera, by the way. Let me see who wrote this. Let's go to the end of the story to see who wrote it. Source news agencies. Okay, so basically that means that Al Jazeera wrote it themselves by compiling various wire reports, AP, AFP, and maybe some of their own reporting as well. Russia, I think, is disgusting what they're doing. I think it's disgusting. Trump told reporters on Thursday, the same day Moscow's attacks on Kiev killed more than 24 people. Trump also said he would send his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, currently in the Middle East, to visit Russia next. Russian President Vladimir Putin has already met Witkoff multiple times in Moscow before Trump's efforts to mend ties with the Kremlin came to a grinding halt. Washington has given Moscow until the end of next week to cease hostilities in Ukraine under threat of severe economic sanctions. Trump reiterated the deadline on Thursday. We're going to put sanctions. I don't know that sanctions bother him, the U.S. president said, referring to Putin. Trump has previously threatened that new measures could mean secondary tariffs targeting Russia's remaining trade partners, such as China and India. This would further stifle Russia, but would risk significant international disruption. Translation, significant international disruption, maybe World War III. That's possible. That's possible. We don't know what will put Putin over the edge, but certainly if President Trump could topple the regime in China, then that would discourage Russia, I suppose, from doing anything crazy, or would it actually push him to do something crazy? I don't know. The president began his second term with his own rosy predictions that the war in Ukraine, raging since Russia invaded its neighbor in February 2022, would soon end. In recent weeks, Trump has increasingly voiced frustration with Putin over Moscow's unrelenting offensive. President Vladimir Zelensky announced on Friday that the rescue operations were complete in Kiev following Russia's drone and missile strikes a day earlier. Unfortunately, as of now, 31 people are known to have died, including 5 children. The youngest child was only 2 years old, he wrote on social media. Well, let's not believe these numbers. In these situations like this, there is a strong incentive to exaggerate the damage but I'm sure some people died, but these are unverified numbers. Russia used over 3,800 drones and nearly 260 missiles for its attacks on Ukraine in July, the president also said. Okay, in an earlier statement, Zelensky urged his allies to bring about regime change in Russia hours after the deadly attack on Kiev. Speaking virtually to a conference marking 50 years since the signing of the Cold War-era Helsinki Accords on Thursday, Zelensky said he believed Russia could be pushed to stop the war. 50 years since the signing of the Cold War-era Helsinki Accords. Okay. But if the world doesn't aim to change the regime in Russia, that means even after the war ends, Moscow will still try to destabilize neighboring countries. You may be correct in that, yes. From late Wednesday to early Thursday, Russia fired at least 300 drones and 8 cruise missiles at Ukraine, with Kiev the main target, the Ukrainian Air Force said. The Russian army, meanwhile, claimed to have captured Chasiv Yar, a strategically important hillside town in eastern Ukraine, where the two sides have been fiercely fighting for months. Moscow has stepped up its deadly aerial assaults on Ukraine in recent months in the conflict, resisting U.S. pressure to end its nearly 3.5-year invasion as its forces grind forward on the battlefield. Well, grind is the word. One person estimated that if Russia wanted to actually conquer the entire territory of Ukraine, and at its current pace, it would take them something like 70 years or more than 70 years. So, in other words, Ukraine will become kind of like Russia's Afghanistan, eventually just sort of grinding down the Russian economy and the Russian population. And of course, after the Soviet Union's failure in Afghanistan was one of the causes for the collapse of the Soviet Union, one of the causes. So Putin has, I'm sure Putin is aware of that. And so he has to make a decision at some point. And how far is he going to push this situation? How far is he going to push it? And does he really want to call President Trump's bluff next week? Or perhaps more importantly, does Xi Jinping want Putin to call President Trump's bluff next week? Right? I mean, Modi, of the Prime Minister of India, I don't know if he has much of a say either way, but Xi Jinping has a great deal of leverage over Russia, and Xi Jinping may be the guy that calls President Trump and President Putin, and says, "Hey, you guys, um, we think we need to take Trump seriously, and you know what? We cannot take indirect sanctions from the United States, and so we're cutting off our support for you. And do what you want, but we're cutting off our support, and we're not going to call Trump's bluff because we've learned already that that's a very dangerous thing to do." Perhaps Xi Jinping will call Putin on the phone and give him that message. That would be good. That would be good. For one thing, it would split Russia and China. And that's also one of the strategic objectives that the United States needs to accomplish today. And also, it would probably, put Putin in a situation where he needs to come to the peace table, perhaps, rather than start firing off missiles. The worst case scenario, of course, would be that Putin goes nuclear. And that's always the danger that we have because Russia is a nuclear country. And somebody, whether it's Putin or somebody else, some guy could go crazy and decide to go nuclear. There's always that possibility. But I think well, Putin would be aware of the consequences of something like that, so I don't think he would go that far. But hey, I was wrong. I thought he wasn't going to invade Ukraine in the first place. So maybe I'm not the one to be making prognostications on what Putin is going to do next. Anyway, so Germany said on Friday it will soon start delivering 2 more Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine as Kiev faces a growing number of Russian drone and missile attacks. After reaching an agreement with the United States, the German military will deliver additional Patriot launchers in the coming days. And Patriot missiles are the ones that they're able to knock down missiles. I'm not sure about drones, but anyway, missiles they're able to knock down. And will supply further components in the next 2 to 3 months, the Defense Ministry said in the statement. Okay, so we'll see what happens here as the coming week goes forward. We'll see what transpires. But I'm sure Xi Jinping is going to call him about something. I don't know if necessarily he's going to. Let me adjust this. He's going to tell him to stop or what, but China's in a difficult position, right, where their economy is pretty bad anyway. And Xi Jinping personally and the Chinese Communist Party as a whole is right now in a pretty precarious situation. So we'll see what kind of decision they make in terms of their involvement with the Ukraine situation. So the coming week will be kind of important for the future of future of the world, I think. Okay. All right, meanwhile, let's see here. Okay. Okay, let's do one more story on Russia. And this is Trump warning Medvedev, the former president of Russia. There was a point in Putin's career where he was forced to step down because of term limits, and so he appointed Medvedev to be the president in his place. And then after that, he simply took over again. So Trump warns Putin's right-hand man, "You're entering very dangerous territory." Trump escalates his war of words with Dmitry Medvedev, who had recently warned that U.S. actions were driving the country toward direct conflict with Russia. Direct conflict with Russia. And Medvedev is, he's clearly a junior partner to Putin. So I don't think he speaks for Putin, but well, I guess he's a guy who, my guess, again, I don't, I can't really speak about Russia with confidence, but he impresses me as being the type of person who likes to imagine that he is much more powerful than he actually is. Donald Trump issued a stern warning to, quote, failed former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. Let me bring this up a bit for you. And urged him to watch his words after he ridiculed the US president on social media. Okay. Let's get this guy out of here if we can. Let's see where we can. Russia and the USA do almost no business together, Trump said in a Midnight Truth social tirade after attacking India's close ties with Russia and setting his sights on Medvedev. Let's keep it that way and tell Medvedev, the failed former president of Russia, who thinks he's still president, to watch his words. He's entering very dangerous territory, he added. Medvedev, who was handpicked by Vladimir Putin to serve as president in 2008 due to term limits, ridiculed Trump's recent ultimatum demanding Russia agree to a ceasefire in Ukraine. So Medvedev said Trump's playing the ultimatum game with Russia, 50 days or 10. He should remember two things. One, Russia isn't Israel or even Iran. Two, each new ultimatum is a threat and a step towards war, not between Russia and Ukraine, but with his own country. And well, what Medvedev says there is not entirely wrong. That is true. There is the possibility that these ultimatums can lead to direct war between Russia and the United States. China would love that for certain, but anyway, of course, at this point, if you leave out nuclear weapons, I think Russia's military is no match for the United States. But that is, if we leave out nuclear weapons, which can we leave out nuclear weapons? That's the problem, isn't it? All right, so let's go to here the situation with the tariffs. Let's look at the Newsmax here. Trump orders sets tariffs for dozens beginning in 7 days. President Trump on Thursday signed an executive order that set new tariffs on a wide swath of U.S. trading partners to go into effect on August 7th, the next step in a trade agenda that will test the global economy and the sturdiness of decades-old alliances. So especially Canada, the 35%. This is interesting to me because this is partly sort of out of spite about what Mark Carney has been saying. And it's also, I think, maybe President Trump is intentionally trying to break up the Canadian Federation by setting these high tariffs and then sort of kind of implying that if Alberta, Saskatchewan, perhaps even British Columbia, perhaps even Manitoba. If these provinces were to leave Canada, then they could get lower tariffs. Um, we'll, we'll, we'll see what this is, what his intention here, but it looks to me as though he's trying to just go ahead and do what he initially said, which is to take over Canada, not the entire country as the 51st state, but perhaps take it over in pieces. That may be the thinking behind this 35%. In response to Canada's continued inaction and retaliation, President Trump has found it necessary to increase the tariff on Canada from 25 to 35% to effectively address the existing emergency, the White House said. What emergency are we talking about? There are at least 4 key reasons for the new action being taken against Canada, Trump has said. As reported by both Forbes and the Associated Press, one is the alleged failure by Canada to sufficiently curb fentanyl trafficking across the northern border, even though fentanyl imports from Canada statistically appear to account for only a fraction of total seizures. Well, total seizures perhaps, but I've seen stories though that actually the cartels, the Mexican cartels, are moving their operations to Canada because now the Mexican border is much more difficult to get through, whereas Canada has thousands of miles of not undefended border, but very loosely defended border with the United States. And there's I don't think there's any desert between Canada and the United States. Even the Montana area is not a desert area there, I don't think. So in a sense, the Canadian border is much easier perhaps for the cartels if they can get their operations up to Canada from Mexico. And so only a fraction of total seizures. That may be true until now, but I think that may be changing very rapidly. The second cited factor, as reported by The Independent, Canada is charging American farmers extremely high retaliatory tariffs on dairy and other agricultural goods. Time and Business Insider have also mentioned a deepening trade deficit as a Trump-cited factor, one estimated at roughly $63 billion. Political and diplomatic factors, Trump has pointed to Canada's decision this week to recognize Palestinian statehood as undermining trust in trade negotiations. And this may have something to do with it, I think the 35%. And maybe as punishment for recognizing Palestine as a state, Trump's retaliation may be to try and see if he can't break up the Canadian Canadian Confederation or Federation. Israel remains on the war footing in Gaza after the militant group Hamas launched a deadly attack. Okay, we know about that. Girding for the continuing tussle with the U.S., Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has reaffirmed resolute support for Canadian workers and businesses while continuing negotiations, all while signaling that a Friday trade deal is unlikely, Reuters said. So Mark Carney may be pushing his luck a bit too far. Maybe, if you're playing poker and it's clear that the other side has, quads, and you've only got maybe a pair or 2 pairs, something like that, it's probably time to eat your ego and swallow your ego and go ahead and fold. Poker players who cannot think rationally lose a lot of money, and Mark Carney may be about to lose his country if he's not careful. I think, my opinion. Media outlets say Canada is also accelerating internal reforms, including dismantling longstanding interprovincial trade barriers to bolster the nation economically and cut reliance on U.S. markets. Okay, well, let's see how quickly he can do that. Reports also note that Canada has taken legal steps at the World Trade Organization, challenging the U.S. actions, citing violations of commitments to the USMCA trade pact involving Mexico, Canada, America, and WTO rules. Newsmax staff and wire service added to this report. So basically, it's basically a Reuters report, globalist Reuters report. I think Canada may be a big loser in this whole tariff situation. Russia, Canada, China, these may be the countries that lose the most. Of course, the EU is going to also lose. Germany is going to lose, but not as much as Canada, that's for sure. We'll see what happens. It's interesting what Trump is doing, historically anyway, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this and studying this situation for many years to come. 10, 20 years from now, people will still be analyzing exactly what happened with the Trump tariffs in 2025 and onward. And who knows what the results will be. These kinds of things often have unintended consequences. Intended consequences, unintended consequences. Sometimes the unintended consequences far outweigh or even outlast the intended consequences, but we'll see what happens. Okay. And by the way, so apparently Trump is telling us that we're all going to get $600 rebate checks. Let's not hold our breath, but that would be interesting. That would be something interesting there. That would kind of offset perhaps the price rises that are coming as a result of the tariffs. But $600, let's see, that's $50 a month. I don't know if that's gonna offset the rise in prices, but we'll have to see. If it's $100 for a couple, okay, then yeah, if it's $100 for a couple, then a family of four gets $100 extra each month, $1,200 for the year. That might work. That might work. We'll see. We'll see. By the way, I told you that here in South Korea, the president handed out, roughly $100 to all Korean citizens and some foreigners as well. And how I got a container of Ben and Jerry's ice cream out of that, and my wife got a visit to the hair salon out of that, paid for by her younger sister. Well, today I discovered how I'm going to pay that back. Bus fares are going up. That's right. Bus fares are going up at least, let's see, roughly 15% starting this fall. So, turns out there's no such thing as a free lunch, and also there's no such thing as free Ben and Jerry's ice cream. You pay it one way or another. Yes. So, yep. One way or another, we always pay. Let's see here. All right, so here, Trump ups tariffs on Canada to 35%. And JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon lauds thoughtful tariffs. All of a sudden, Jamie Dimon's getting very friendly with President Trump. I'm not sure what that's about. Very interesting. What is he doing? He's not trying to become the next Treasury Secretary, is he? It's possible. Maybe if Scott Bessent becomes head of the Fed next year, potentially. I mean, Scott Bessent is obviously a candidate for that. Then maybe Jamie Dimon wants to become Treasury Secretary. I don't know. Right now, he's the CEO of the biggest bank in America. We'll see but whenever these people, whenever they say something, they're not telling you what they really mean, or they're not telling you what their motivations are. Or let's see here, Trump's tariffs made U.S. the hottest country in the world. Okay. He extends tariff talks with Mexico for 90 days, giving Mexico another 90 days. And 25% tariff on India. And appeals court challenges Trump's emergency tariffs. We'll see how that works out. And here, okay, 154,000 federal workers took Trump buyout offers source. And I think they continue to get paid until September, I think. And they won't have to have another job until then. Maybe they're, I don't know where they are. Maybe they're on some sort of ocean cruise or something right now. Nations scramble for deals before tariff deadline. Okay. And appeals court challenges Trump tariff emergency. Tariffs again. So, and also he's pressuring the farmers, big pharma CEOs, to cut their prices. And he's telling them to have to cut their prices within, what is it, 60 days or what is it? Let's take a look at this story. U.S. President Donald Trump sent letters to the chief executives of 17 major pharmaceutical companies urging immediate action to lower the cost of prescription drugs for Americans, the White House said Thursday. Letters were sent to top executives at Eli Lilly, Sanofi. Copies of the letters are posted on Trump's Truth Social account. He's calling on the companies to extend most favored nation pricing to Medicaid, guaranteeing such pricing for new drugs and return excess overseas revenue to American patients and taxpayers without providing details. And he has given the companies until September 29th. So that's basically 60 days to respond with binding commitments to those terms. So according to recent data, the prices that Americans have been paying for brand name drugs are more than 3 times the price other similarly developed nations pay, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt said. She added the administration still will deploy every tool in our arsenal to end abusive drug pricing practices. And this disparity in the price of drugs between the United States and other countries has been known for quite a long time. And I know some people who live near the Canadian border, for example, have been known to get their prescriptions filled in Canadian pharmacies. I don't know if that's actually illegal in Canada, but it's been going on anyway. And I think also maybe Mexican pharmacies, maybe also Tijuana and places like that. And I've told you about my experience here in Korea, where, in Korea, there's a law that says that out of patent brand name pharmaceuticals, right, out of patent, in other words, the patent has expired, pharmaceuticals have to be sold at the same price as the generic equivalent. And until recently, I didn't have insurance. I have insurance now in Korea. Once you live in Korea for 6 months, you are required, it is compulsory that you join the National Health Insurance program. And you don't even have to ask, they just do it for you automatically. So I'm paying now. Of course, then I have to pay the premium, and they decide what the premium is. And for Korean citizens, the premium is decided by their income and their assets. For foreigners, such as myself, they don't know what income is, or they don't know how much I actually receive in income or what my assets might be overseas or something like that. So they say, okay, you know what, we'll take the average. We'll take the average of all the premiums paid by all the people who pay into the system, and that's your premium. So as a result, I think beginning in July, I'm paying a little more than $100 a month for as my, and that's compulsory. That's not an option that I have. Anyway, so but before I had that insurance, so I went 6 months without insurance here in Korea, and I found that what I was paying, because I had some prescription drugs in America, and I went to a doctor here, and he's prescribing them for me now. What I was paying as a person without insurance was similar to what I was paying in America as a person with insurance. That's, anyway, my experience. So there is a big difference. And now that I have insurance, well, the copay at the doctor's office is like $1. Sometimes, sometimes it's $3 or $4. But there's a huge disparity. That's true. Okay. All right. So, and many countries are like this. You know, the Korean system is basically what the Democrats are trying to get for America. That is, it's a single payer system, a single payer system. And until the current system was instituted, I don't know when it was instituted, but a couple of decades ago, there was various private insurances that people could subscribe to. But now everybody's in the same system, and it's a single payer. In other words, the government, or at least it's not the government. Well, they don't call it the government, but it's the I think they call it a publicly owned corporation, I guess. In other words, a government-owned corporation. They collect our premiums, and then they pay out to doctors whatever it is that they. So they decide what I should pay, and they also decide what they're going to pay the doctors. So it's a little bit, I don't know. Well, they're setting prices on both ends. I don't. it's it's a it's a socialist system, I think, and it's losing money. I checked and see it is a deficit, and um, so far I have not had a problem with wait periods or things like that. But we'll see how it works out in the long run. Anyway, so I'm living in a socialist healthcare system right now. And this is the thing that with in many cases, the reason that the drug prices are lower is because the government of a country will say, hey, this is how much we're going to pay for you, or this is how much you're going to charge for your medicine in our country. And they sort of mandate that. It's price fixing. It's price fixing. And Americans have been picking up the tab for that price fixing. And that's been the pharmaceutical companies' excuse for the high drug prices in America. But we know that big pharma, of course, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of lobbying in Congress and so forth. So we'll see how it works out. But definitely the healthcare system needs more competition. And of course, in the 20 Constitution, government is not allowed to be involved in healthcare at all. So Medicare, Medicaid, both will not exist in the United States of China. Medicare and Medicaid will not exist. It will be entirely privatized in the United States of China. So we'll see how that works out. And I noticed that in many ways, the world is moving more and more towards the Constitution of the United States of China. For example, Scott Bessent saying yesterday that the Trump accounts that kids are going to get, the babies are going to get, will be kind of a replacement for Social Security, or they will represent a privatization or lead to the privatization of Social Security. So more and more, just the natural course of things seems to be going towards the Constitution of the United States of China, which I find very interesting. All right, let's see what else is going on with the Newsmax. Okay, let's share this again. All right, construction of Trump Ballroom to begin, and apparently the cost of that, the $200 million, is all donated, which is a good thing. He's not, they're not taking any money from the government, whether it's taxpayer money or borrowed money. It's all donated. And Trump lays into Jerome Powell. Well, I think Jerome Powell already knows that come May of next year, he's going to have a new job, or maybe retire, because he's not going to be in his current job anymore beyond that. That's when his term expires. And I think Scott Bessent, I believe it was said that Trump is going to announce his nomination to the Senate for a new Fed chairman towards the end of this year. And then that person will have to be confirmed by the Senate at that point. And here, Medvedev's war threat to dangerous territory, okay. And Israelis and Palestinians must talk directly. Really? If I were Israel, I don't think I would put a whole lot of hope in talks with Palestinians or with Iran. These people are dead set on destroying Israel. So I don't think there's any compromise that can be achieved. Let's see here. Hamas is being rewarded by this. France is saying they're going to recognize Palestine. In the UK also, maybe this autumn, September, maybe getting ready to recognize a Palestinian state. And President Trump is dead set against that. He says it rewards Hamas. And also Canada is talking about recognizing Palestine so as a state. And especially Canada, I think, needs to walk that back. And here, Whitaker says Trump has leverage to force Russia's hand. Let's hope so. Let's hope so. But gotta watch out for those nukes. And Marshall, Canada complicating trade efforts, right? And Fed should not be partisan. Yes. FBI ignored Clinton's role in Russia hoax. Kiev Mormons after Russian attack killed 31 people, but this 31 people is not verified. That's what Zelensky is saying. Teacher admitted killing couple headed to court. All right. Fed board must take control from Powell. Well, that'll be one thing. And last Wednesday, there were two members of the Federal Reserve Board that actually dissented against Chairman Powell. And so President Trump, I think, is trying to encourage that kind of division within the board. Let's see how that works out. U.S. to fund deportations from Costa Rica. What's that about? Doesn't sound very important. All right, let's see. And FBI has established a new office in New Zealand so as to counter China's influence there in the South Pacific. Well, kind of late, but hopefully that can be done. Let's see then also we have, what do we have here? Analysts here question whether EU can triple U.S. energy imports by 2026 and so forth. Well, if they can, then I'm sure Trump will come up with a new strategy or a new talk. Every time, he says, okay, we're going to do this, and when it runs into problems, he just says, okay, then we'll do this other thing. So he's pretty flexible and nimble in that sense, and that frustrates people who are trying to plan around what he says. And this is interesting. Oklahoma is taking on the Chinese Communist Party. Let's take a look at this. Oh, this is a video. I'm sorry. This is a 22-minute video. Okay, well, you can watch that later on. All right. And they're reviving the presidential fitness test in schools. All right, well, that's about it for Epic Times. Okay, let's pay a visit to Breitbart, I guess, right? Okay. Yeah. Whistleblower reveals how they were threatened to go along with Obama-directed Russia hoax. Okay. Brennan desperate. It's John Brennan, yeah. And he's truly an evil man. Uh, I think he basically thought that he was going to, be the power in the background, power behind the curtain, actually running the country. And perhaps he was to a certain extent. Now he's criticizing Trump for using government institutions as political football as well. He does not have any place to stand there. And uh, and Trey Gowdy says Comey did generational damage to the FBI. Brennan is allergic to the truth. Yes, for a good reason, because the truth will get him in jail. And while the left is test running censorship tactics in Brazil. Okay, and let's see, the Arab nations have clarity on Hamas that UK, France, Canada don't. Right. Arab nations are not supporting Hamas, whereas these Western nations, and I don't know what it is. Is it white guilt? What is it? What is it about these liberal guilt or about these maybe colonial guilt, I suppose, that are making them driving them to make stupid, ignorant decisions about Hamas? On Thursday's broadcast of News Nation's On Balance, United States Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee said that he's glad that Arab nations like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE had the moral clarity to call on Hamas to surrender and release the hostages, and said, I just wish the Europeans and some of the other nations that are supposed to be highly developed, highly civilized would have picked the side of the civilized people and not the uncivilized savages who massacred people on October 7th, instead of choosing Hamas over Israel. Could be said, one thing I think is interesting, it's the European nations and Canada and other Western civilized nations who are pushing Israel harder than they're pushing Hamas. And it's fascinating that this week it was the Saudis, the Qataris, the Emiratis who said to Hamas, lay down your weapons, let the hostages go. My gosh, think about what a contrast that is. Host Leyland Vittert then asked UK, France, and Canada have said that they will recognize a Palestinian state in September and basically abandon Israel. Is it fair to say that those three countries have chosen Hamas over Israel? That could be answered, that's a very fair statement. It sounds harsh, but how else can you interpret it? Later, Huckabee added, President Trump today spoke with clarity, with moral clarity, and he called out the bad guys for who they are. He identified Hamas as the bad guys. And that's something that we needed. Thankfully, you had other Arab nations who are doing the same thing, and I'm grateful for the clarity that they exhibited this week. I just wish the Europeans and some of the other nations that are supposed to be highly developed, highly civilized, would have picked the other side of the civilized people and not the uncivilized savages who massacred. Just repeating here, so forth. Okay. So, yeah, I think it is sort of a colonial guilt here. It's UK, France, at least for UK and France, certainly because they were the colonial powers in the Middle East until the end of the Second World War, until the end of the Second World War, basically. After the First World War, and also Canada. Canada is just, well, Canada's Canada, I guess. Canada is without excuse. Canada. Canada. Yeah, it's interesting what's happening to Canada. Yugoslavia broke up. There used to be a country called Yugoslavia, and it does not exist anymore. Instead, you have Croatia. You have what else do you have? Serbia. You have Montenegro. You have Bosnia and Herzegovina. You have Slovenia. So you have, I'm probably missing one or two, but you have a bunch of countries that came out of Yugoslavia. And Canada may go that route, right? You may have, okay, the Republic of Alberta, the Republic of Saskatchewan, the Republic of British Columbia, Republic of Manitoba. And they may come together as the Republic of Western Canada or something like that, but they're not going to join the United States immediately. There has to be some negotiation, and remember, the U.S. Only admits states 2 by 2 now, and there has to be one Republican and one Democrat state. So maybe Alberta and Puerto Rico, for example. So, but it's not going to be just Alberta alone, because well, it has to be approved by the Senate, and the Democrats and Republicans are not going to approve any new additions to the states unless they're pretty sure that they're admitting one Republican and one Democrat state. That's the way it worked with Hawaii and Alaska after the Second World War. And I'm sure if there are any additional states, there may be, but they're going to be admitted at 2 by 2. And maybe Washington, D.C. and I don't know, Saskatchewan. I don't know. I don't know how the voting would go in Saskatchewan, but I'll bet that already somebody in the Democrat Party and somebody in the Republican Party are doing secret public opinion polls in these Canadian provinces to see how they would vote if they were a part of the United States. I bet there's a lot of talk going on about that even now. All right, let's see what else is going on here. Okay. All right. Okay, Brown University. Okay. Trump admin baits Dems into humiliation. Okay. Well, Breitbart always likes to have those kinds of headlines. The hidden logic to Trump's trade deals revolves around China. Let's take a look at this. This is an opinion piece on Breitbart TV. Martel talks about China policy. He said a lot of these trade deals, for example, these negotiations where he got a huge deal on copper with Indonesia, you don't have to name China, you don't have to talk about China, but that clearly affects, I'm sure he meant affects China's monopoly on critical minerals, and it's going to put tension on China's relationship with Chile, which is the biggest copper producer in the world. Ah, I see. Well, that's interesting. I wasn't aware that there was something going on with Indonesia. Let's just quickly check here. Okay. Indonesia. Oh, I see. Indonesia eyes market edge as 19% tariff. Okay, so I see. So he's putting pressure on Chile and then giving Indonesia the edge in the U.S. market. That's what that's about. Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs announced that the 19% reciprocal tariff between Indonesia and the United States will take effect on August 7th. Okay, and the tariff has been one of the lowest in Southeast Asia, with the exception of Singapore. Believes Indonesia still has significant opportunities to compete in the U.S. export market, especially when compared to India. All right, and here that the new tariff policy opens up opportunities to improve Indonesia's competitiveness in the U.S. market, particularly for major Indonesian products that are not produced in the U.S. and are therefore subject to lower tariffs. Well, if there's something about copper here, let's see. He said several Indonesian commodities receive zero import tariffs, including copper concentrate and copper cathode. Ah, okay. So Indonesian copper concentrate and copper cathode are getting 0% tariffs, import tariffs. Let me see. That solves the question then why President Trump was putting tariffs on a primary commodity such as copper. He's punishing Chile. Chile is, I guess, close to China. So yeah, so a Chinese ally, Chile, is being punished, and then Indonesia is being favored, and also being cut away from China. Fantastic. Okay, now I understand. All right, gotta go. Tomorrow's Saturday. I'll see you then. Until then, God bless Godspeed.